All right, we're good. Welcome to Divorce or Civil War. I'm your host, Rex Lee Reed. Today we have Marc Girardot on the line with us, and we're going to talk about the bolus theory and how it looks like this may be kind of the magic bullet to prevent vaccine injuries. Seems like a unusual topic for a podcast called Divorce or Civil War, but the thing here is we need a divorce from all the systems that we have. Our medical training, our CDC, FDA, they're all broken. And unless people like me and Marc come together, or whomever it may be, to try and solve these problems and get at it without the money influence, no one is benefited. Neither of us are a doctor, or at least I'm not a doctor. So consult your healthcare professionals. We're going to start out with some hope. We got a couple things on the list that we want to go through: oxygenation and fasting for those who are vaccine injured, and then we're going to get into how that came about. So take it away, Marc. We are our brother's keeper, as you know.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Marc Girardot. I've been working probably close to 10,000 hours now on COVID and vaccine injuries and solutions to it. I have a Substack called the COVID Mythbuster series. I've just finished a book called The Needle's Secret that explains all of that and how vaccine harm happens. And when I started the book, I was a bit I was a bit low and sad because I was like, okay, so I know how to stop this, and we'll discuss it. Stop more vaccine injuries from happening. There's solution to that, and we'll work on it at the end of the interview. Uh, but I didn't have any solutions and cure for people who had been harmed. Now, let me be blunt now. COVID vaccines has hurt a tremendous number of people, but other vaccines have done the same for the past 50 years. They've just been camouflaged and hidden away, either subconsciously or consciously, um, collectively by us together. And what I wanted to tell you is there's a cure to a lot of these illnesses. Now it's hard for me to tell you why, because you'll need to understand the um, the theory behind it. But fundamentally, some of you might have heard. Well, there's a few things. Let's first, Rex talked about fasting. Let me try and explain you why fasting can help. It can't cure, but it can help very quickly some people who are hurting or who have neurodegenerative disease. Um, and the reason for that is that most of these illnesses are tied to the fact that blood tissue barriers have been physically broken. Microperforation that was done by the immune system, and I'll explain why later. But fundamentally, all these barriers, wherever they are in the bodies, we've evolved during hundreds of thousands of years to have them so that we're not poisoned, so that our brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier. The milk is that you're giving to your infant or your baby is actually perfectly adapted to him or her. That our sperm and ovocytes are protected from attacks so that our babies can be born, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is these vaccines often do this microperforation of the inside of our blood vessels. And so when you fast, um, you are going to limit the elements that are not supposed to enter into whatever was supposed to be protected. So if it's in the brain, for example, you're going to have less albumin entering your gray matter, and therefore you're going to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's. Um, if it's in the nerve and you have neuropathies, the reason you have an inflammation is because you have metabolic wastes from having eaten that is actually circulating in your blood, and that's going to pollute your nerves and react with your nerves, and that's why when the immune system tries to clean it up, you're having this inflammation and the pain that goes with it. So so when I started my book, fasting was the only solution I had to propose. And what's interesting is it when I started looking into research papers saying, well, this Parkinson's, which is also related to microperforation of the blood-brain barrier, is Parkinson's slowed down by fasting, and it is. Is fibromyalgia also. So fasting is incredibly powerful way and logical ways anybody can understand. If if you let's say you only eat um, at 1 p.m. every day, a very good lunch, and then you have a small dinner, and then you don't eat until 1 p.m. the next day, which is every day, which is called intermittent fasting. Then during a whole part of the day, your blood is going to be clean. It's going to be clean. It's not going to be polluting, and you're going to give more time to your immune system to clean up things. And a lot of these illnesses are tied to age and your immune capacity to clean it up. So that's why fasting is an interesting way to reduce pain and to reduce inflammation, and it works quite quickly, quite rapidly. Now, the problem with fasting is, in French we say chirurgie. It's just a band-aid, okay? It's not going to fix everything. It's not a cure. Um, the cure is a different thing. Um, the reason normally our bodies are supposed to heal. We have healing capacity. The problem is when vaccines injuries occur, there's a huge disbalance in the vascular system where it occurs, and therefore all the standard healing mechanisms um, are are um, are basically miscalibrated. You're going to have too much, you're going to have too much allocation of growth factors, and you're going to have fistulas and angiomas. Uh, you're not going to have enough stem cells repair, and you're going to have arteriosclerosis and calcification, um, et cetera, et cetera. Now, often the issue, notably the issue of microperforation, which is basically holes that have been poked into the inside of your capillaries in various areas, and they are never repaired. Um, and we know that stem cells can repair these holes because there's a very magical partnership between the fetus and the mother, where the stem cells of the fetus actually repair the mom during pregnancy. Um, it's actually one of the only magical moments of those past 4 years where I've been dealing into gloomy stuff. But this is really fantastic. Is when you compare uh, women who have had children with women who haven't had children, they have much less Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease.
Interesting.
And when you check their brain, you're gonna find women with Y chromosomes, which is the easiest way to prove that a baby or a fetus is actually repairing the mother. Now that's a very important proof point. Is that years after an accident like that, stem cells can come and repair, most likely over time. A pregnancy is 9 months, so probably over a few months, circulating stem cells are going to come and repair that brain barrier. Now, the question that I had at one point when I was looking into that was like, okay, well, how do we do that? And of course, a lot of people have been talking about stem cell therapy. The problem with stem cell therapy, beyond the fact that it's extremely expensive and relatively unsafe, but the last point for me is that they've been using actually fetal stem cells, which is not necessarily great, but also they're asking people to take immunosuppressants for life, which is not. So I very quickly crossed it out and said, well, this is not the solution for the millions of people who have been harmed that we're talking about. But within my research, I looked at stem cells because there's a link between cancer and stem cells. And if you're interested, I'll tell you why later. But I realized through my research that stem cells can be stimulated by oxygen. Stem cells, you probably, I don't know if you know, but stem cells are not they're here to do two things: to conserve our matrix, or basically our genetics intact, and then to scale and multiply very, very quickly so that you can have white immune cells, red blood cells, as well as repair cells throughout the body. And so they are extremely sensitive to hyperoxygenation. My take on that is that when you exercise, you're going to hyperventilate, and you're going to bring more oxygen to those stem cells, and that's, from an evolutionary standpoint, makes a lot of sense for you to, if you're running away from a tiger or whatever, you're going to scratch your hand. If you're still alive, you're going to have very quickly the need for repair, right? And so it's, stem cells react to reactive oxygen series or species, sorry, and they and therefore when you use hyperbaric oxygen therapy, over time you can actually repair quite a lot of illnesses. I wrote, there's an article that I wrote right before Christmas where I basically said, this is my gift to you guys for Christmas. It's oxygen therapy, and what the stem cells do is they're not, obviously they're not targeted, right? It's a chaotic repair work. So it's going to take time to slowly repair as they circulate through your body, and then how you re-stimulate stem cells every day or every other day or whenever you go to these sessions. They're going to slowly repair all the areas of your bodies that have been damaged, right? And they're going to do fundamentally two things. They're going to repair the endothelium, so they're going to repair all your blood tissue barriers, which is extremely important, and that will stop all the degenerative diseases. Okay, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, Huntington's, MS, multiple sclerosis. It'll simply stop the process. Of course, if you lost the memory of a loved one, you this is not going to repair stuff that's lost, and to a certain extent, the damage that have been done won't be undone. Even though some of it will, because at the same time, the stem cells are going to revascularize areas that have been that are lacking vascularization. It's going to create new blood vessels. So that's why actually the FDA is, this is serious science. It's been authorized by the FDA for 8 different um, conditions. Notably, when you use radiotherapy for cancer, which destroys a ton of things and harms, is very harmful to tissue, and therefore, it's quite clear that the benefits are huge. Also, when you get when you become blind very quickly, brutal blindness, they let you, and it works. It works. It basically rebuilds. Oh, it's. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a miracle. It's a miracle of life. It's basically what oxygen therapy does is it helps your body to understand that it hasn't finished the healing process.
Mm.
Um, and so what's really interesting is there's quite a few testimonials on the internet of people who've been cured of Parkinson's disease, for example. Extremely, even I read yesterday, there's a mother who has seen enormous improvements for her daughter who has Down syndrome. It's a genetic disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's and what's very interesting is you can see you need time. As I said, it's very important. Don't let people tell you it doesn't work because they tested it an hour. Okay, well, it's quite clear that if your body hasn't managed repairing it when it had its chance, that the damage is such that it's going to require time. Okay, and the the typical numbers where people are fully healed is about 40 hours of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is basically you're in a chamber. You get 1.4, 1.7, 2 atmospheres pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and you breathe pure oxygen. Um, I I personally believe that you can actually do it at normal baric at 1 atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to do the same thing. It's just going to be much slower. It's just going to be much slower. There's no reason. The only thing that pressure does is bring more oxygen. At one time, and it basically triggers more cellular divisions per amount of time. But at the same time, it's pretty complicated and expensive to go to these hyperbaric chambers. So oxygen concentrators exist, and that's most likely going to be the industrialization of this.
The
Um,
home version, if you will.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
do
yeah,
that at home.
and what's I for my book, I simulated the the number of people in the U.S. that
Mm-hmm.
have been harmed by vaccines over the years,
How many?
and
Well,
basically
yes.
my estimate is about 55 million people have been harmed clinically. Okay, meaning 55 million people have had to go to the hospital because of vaccine
Okay.
injury,
Right.
and about 190 million people have been harmed to a degree that they could have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, celiac disease, um, obesity. Obesity is tied to leaky gut, and most likely, the I lived in the U.S. in the 70s. People ate the same junk food as today, contrary to what everybody says, except they didn't have Diet Coke at the time. Um, and I remember going to the swimming pool, and nobody was obese in 1970s in the U.S. Um, and so it has to be something else. It's not only behavior. We've actually damaged the bodies of millions of people, millions of Americans, and also across the world. And the good news is there's a solution.
So, in your opinion, with the bolus theory, is it the majority of it's irritating, inflaming, destroying the endothelial lining? Is that the primary mechanism? I mean, I know you mentioned that that's what the oxygenation is repairing, and that's kind of what I've been reading, through the COVID thing. Now, I don't have your background in it. I'm just the data guy, right? What's in, what's out. But the biological, it's intrigued me as I've read it. I'm like, oh wow, this is fascinating. I should have studied this when I was earlier. Or
It's very
studied.
simple. Okay, so the bolus theory is very simple. Um, the reason it's the only possible theory is it's because it's the only possible way you can bypass evolution's protections.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution has put in place, and it's very logical when you think about it. Anything that was poisonous, right, or anything that made our bodies vulnerable to poisoning, either poisoning of the endothelium or poisoning of the genes and the stem cells,
Mm-hmm.
all these peoples are gone. Okay, the only peoples who are left are people who had protection, a variety of protections, shields, filters, um, that avoid poisoning and of both endothelial cells and stem cells. And how does that work? Well, if you take on poison, if of course if the dose is enormous, there's no protection, you die. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking tiny doses with a vaccine. So normally, if you take a tiny dose of chlorine, right, in your tap water in the U.S., there's quite a bit. You're drinking it. What happens? Well, it's first of all, it's in the lumen, in the middle of the blood vessels, is stored there, and it doesn't touch anything before it goes to the liver and to the spleen and to the kidneys where it's filtered. So everything is filtered before it can actually damage much. And then if ever it hasn't been filtered and overflows into the body, it's going to be disseminated throughout the body, where every single microenvironment is going to be in a capacity to take a shot, a bit like a bulletproof vest, if you will, right? In a bulletproof vest, instead of having, taking the shot in the heart, you take the shot and it spreads it across. Well, the evolution has done exactly the same with poison. Um, and of course, if you bypass that, and that's what a direct intravenous injection of the vaccine does, and I'll explain why it can do that later. Then what you have is the magnifying glass effect. During the first minute or 50 seconds, you're going to have a huge dose, highly concentrated dose, that normally is supposed to be spread out, but that's hitting places at a 270,000 times higher concentration. And we've never evolved for that. So whatever wall, endothelial wall of your vascular walls take this, they get damaged very, very seriously. Whole swaths of endothelium just get stripped away by the immune system that's reacting. The T cells are attacking and they're taking it away. And it triggers thrombosis, aneurysms, fistulas, arteriosclerosis, necrosis, and microperforation, which I've talked about. So that's for the the part that's the cells that are sensitive to the immune system, normal cells, endothelial cells, and tissue cells. And then there are let's say the royalty cells, if you will, the cells that are so precious that the immune system can't touch them, and those are stem cells. And here again, because they're so precious, we've evolved, and they're hidden away. They're in the bone marrow, hidden away from viruses, bacteria, and poison. They're in endothelial niches, okay, nested away from all of that. And so when you inject properly a vaccine, yeah, maybe you have 1 in a million chance of hit, of one of those being hit. But if you inject a bolus, then the probabilities are probably, 1,000 times higher. And what it does, interestingly enough, it's going to do two things. The stem cells is going to be contaminated by this material, whatever it is. Here it's mRNA that's going to start producing proteins. It could be a protein, it could be something else. The stem cell is going to do the same thing as with oxygen. It's going to start multiplying to dilute the vaccine, to dilute the poison, right? It's the only thing it could do. That's the only conjecture I have in my theory, to be honest with you. But it's consistent with ROS, with the reactive oxygen species reaction. So it's going to multiply.
That you think that T cells are causing the damage because they're producing so many of them, or their stem cells, excuse me?
So that's where what I've discovered is not it's not completely new, but fundamentally, one question, one observation. Let's go back to observation.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear that these vaccines have triggered cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's an explosion of cancer, case studies, case reports everywhere. Anybody who tells you it's not true is lying.
They're getting paid by somebody.
No, it's very, very clear. There's tons of articles explaining it, but it's not new, by the way. You have cat sarcoma, people who have cats and vaccinate them. They also get cancer from other vaccines. But the question I asked myself was, hold on a second. If the cells that are contaminated by the vaccines are killed by the T cells, where do these supposedly mutated tumors come from? How did that happen? And the only logical conclusion is that those are not normal cells. Those are cells that are immune protected because they weren't killed. Okay? And the only cells that are immune privileged are stem cells and progenitor cells. Now, I had a huge aha moment when I started looking into comparing the features of a stem cells with the feature of a cancer cells. It just so happens that a cancer cells has all the features of a stem cells. So they supposedly, the theory until now was that a normal cell would mutate back into that. Now, from a probability standpoint, that's impossible. The number of mutation that the cell would have to do to get through are mathematically impossible to achieve, and they're achieving it all the time. So my theory was so it's not mutating. What it is we're poisoning a stem cell, right? And that stem cell is multiplying very quickly, and it's being damaged in the process. So sometimes it's you have mutations or you have gene problems in some of those cancer cells. But more importantly, what you've actually built is an excess infrastructure of stem cells. So basically, let's say you have a certain number of these level of stem cells are here. There's no demand for stem cell growth, but you're actually producing 100 new ones. And therefore, when you're going to ask for a burger, you're going to have 10 cooks in the kitchen sending 10 burgers instead of one. Okay, which is the very definition of cancer. So this is very important because it's important to understand cancer, right? For example, it explains very well why you would have a high-grade cancer, a very aggressive cancer, or a low-grade cancer, an indolent cancer. Because of course, if you hit a high scale, high up in the hierarchy, high-ranking stem cell, you're going to have a super, fast and aggressive cancer.
Okay,
have
so
a
that explains the
low.
aggressiveness of these. You think it targeted those more than any other?
No, it's
Or
targeting them both. It's just that's exposure would have more low grade stem cells. What you're seeing, what we've seen in the past 2 years, has been very aggressive cancers and very quick death because because they were visible. But it's quite obvious that there's a huge pyramid underneath that of more normal, or medium
Mhm.
speed and low speed or low indolent cancers for sure also.
So let me ask a question about that, and I'm sure I'm going to mangle this not being in that realm, but the type of cancer that are the aggressive ones, let's say, I think you talked about like a double negative or something like that, right? So they have markers that tell you what they are.
Yeah.
It's the ones that, has any of that changed from a pathology perspective? And see if I can put that into English that even I can understand. Have you seen any of these new cancers that look different from the old cancers? This is just strictly mRNA part. In other words,
No, I
past
don't
three
think
years, it's
so.
basically the identical stuff. It's just triggering the same old mechanisms.
Yeah. I mean, you're mentioning triple negative breast cancer, okay, which is very aggressive. But you see, it's triple negative because it doesn't have receptors from the outside, which means it hasn't specialized. It's the definition of a high-ranking stem cells is they're high-ranking because they're not completely yet specialized. The
Gotcha.
more specialized they are, the lower ranking they are, the slower they are.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that.
At least that's my theory. What's really interesting is when I started putting all this together, I started, going into. I had worked in cancer for quite a while, working for an anti-cancer DNA vaccine company 5 years ago, and sorry, I lost track what I wanted to say. Sorry.
Nope.
Sorry.
That's all right. I got a question for you, right? And then
Go
you
ahead.
can calibrate on that.
Yeah.
So something comes to my mind when I look at the mRNA versus the regular vaccines. Now, I know that you're saying that the numbers, and right, it's hard to tell from a measurement perspective because you went out and gave this to what, 6 billion people. So all of a sudden you have a flooding of the market and you have to aggregate that over, let's say 20% of the population got the flu vaccine in 2019, just, throwing out some numbers. But I wonder how much difference there is between what's going on in the endothelial lines. And I think you talked to Norman about this, the PED covering versus aluminum versus lipid nanoparticles. And then once that covering is worn off, if it's been a bolus effect, is one causing more inflammation than the other? I mean, it would stand to reason one would be better or worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a lot of confounding factors here, Rex. The PEG, the PEG is a coating
Mm-hmm.
that's on the nanoparticles of the mRNA vaccines, and it's there so that they don't glue together inside the vials, and then you don't get a blob of oil basically blocking your arteries, which is also very dangerous.
Yes.
So so basically it's I what I told Norman the other day is it's actually very positive to have that, because it means that during the phase that it's most concentrated at the injection point, it's actually coated and protected, and it can't harm at that moment. It's only when it rubs off and gets eroded out, that then transfection can happen. So the window is actually very, very, very small. I mean, this this whole disaster is happening mostly between plus 10 seconds and plus 40 or 50 seconds after after the injection. Okay, After that, it get dilute, completely diluted away. And before that, it just cannot transfect.
Well, when you all right, when you say transfect, can you define that for me?
Well, transfection is the fact of inserting genetic material inside a cell that's okay. So it's infect, because infect needs to be a virus,
Hmm.
but some vaccines infect in a way, right? The attenuated viruses vaccines actually infect um, a cell. The fact is, in both cases, all of these vaccines, what they do is they insert either a message or what is called an antigen. So basically, a marker that would signal that cell for destruction by the immune system. And that's really one thing I was very uncomfortable with this going into the bloodstream was the reason why these platforms, um, everybody says, oh, it's a feat, etc. No, I mean, if you have a neoantigen cancer today, they can make a vaccine personalized for you in 10 weeks. Okay. So there
With
was nothing surprising.
the mRNA?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was nothing surprising to me to the fact that they do that. What they took is they took the basically the vehicle,
Hmm.
and they they added on the antigen. They added on the mRNA that's going to produce that protein. That's basically what they did. I mean, they did some magic or not. I mean, manipulations that some people like, dislike, whatever. But fundamentally, that's what they did to the immune system. At least to the T cells, they don't care. If the antigen was inserted, if it was fabricated by the cell, if that is a mistake of the cell, or if it's a virus, or if it's a vaccine, the immune system just checks on it versus its database and says, well, this is not me. You're not supposed to be producing that, so I'm going to kill you, or actually, I'm going to tell you to self-destruct. That's what happens. That in of itself is not a problem. This happens every day to millions of cells throughout our bodies because of a reason or another. The problem is when that is concentrated, when you have hundreds or thousands of cells that are packed together and are all expressing a virus, a protein, or a vaccine marker. When you have that concentration, the immune cells just destroys everything, and we've never evolved for that. We've just never evolved for that. And that's why you have these white clot syndrome, for example, that people have been talking about. That's the epitome of the immune system destroying completely the vascular system, and our body's putting a band-aid over it, which is
Hmm.
this white fibrin polymer that's in there, which is not a pathology per se, which is more actually a reaction of the body to try and avoid a disaster.
Have they ever seen that in any vaccine prior to the mRNA? Because I'm not aware of it, but then.
It exists. It was called white clot syndrome, and they thought the theory was it was supposed to be related to heparin reaction, anticoagulant reaction. I believe that's not really what's happening. I wrote an article 2 weeks ago on it. I think what's happening is again an imbalance. When you look at the extent of the damage, it means the entire wall has been destroyed. That means that the entire wall has been transfected, which completely validates or vindicates the Bullis theory. Because for this to happen,
Hmm.
you need to have a huge dose simultaneously at that moment, and just washing with particles these walls, so that every single one of these cells has been contaminated, and then the immune system just comes in and storms this off and just rips it away. But then you have entire walls without are called endothelial cells, and they have, they do a lot of things. They regulate your blood pressure. They produce calcification inhibitors, so you don't have calcification. And they produce something was called a plasminogen activators, which activates plasmin, which is supposed to dissolve that white gooey stuff, the fibrin. So basically, when you've destroyed all of those those endothelial cells, you've frozen the repair, if you will.
You've the body is trying to stop itself from bleeding out, in essence, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's exactly what it's done. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. But it's a cast. It's a cast more than a clot.
Right.
And it's a cast that's supposed to be replaced by stem cells, supposed to to repair the walls, and then this is supposed to be dissolved. But since you don't have endothelial cells in proximity, because it's, we're talking very large pieces, then you don't have that activation, and those people have basically a new form of arteriosclerosis to a certain extent. It's not plaque, it's different.
Okay. So I did have one question I wanted to, the obesity question.
Yeah.
And being an amateur bodybuilder, Pee Wee Herman could outlift me, but that's beside the point. It seems like to me that in this, and I was just reading an article on Alzheimer's, as a matter of fact, and that's one of the things they were talking about. And you're talking about that to a certain extent as well, is the inflammation is reduced when you're fasting. My only thing, and this would be my only disagreement with what I've read of yours, is the obesity thing. Of course, then again, I'm more prone to think that people need to take more responsibility, and they could quit that before they got there. That's just my bias. But I wonder if you could go into that a little bit. How you come to that. I understand the data tells you that, but I also understand the data tells me when I look elsewhere that people have just been getting fatter for the past 50 years. Of course, now vaccines have been increasing, but they've also been getting fatter because I don't think people work nearly like they used to, right? In the 70s, you and I were out playing baseball, doing something, riding our bike across town. Now they sit at home and do the internet or play games all day. How many channels are on Rumble, like people playing games? I'm like, this cannot be true.
Okay, okay, there's a few interesting things you just said. I want to talk about. The one thing that I'm now extremely cautious about is a moral judgment. Why? Because I've come to realize that consciously or not, the medical institutions have been using this as a way to blame others for their own fault. Okay, and let me give you an example. Sudden infant death syndrome is most likely tied to vaccine injuries and to that. Okay, it's quite crazy. Instead of putting on the table, of the hypothesis table, we've messed up.
Yep.
How come this is happening? They haven't put it, and they're basically putting two theories on the table. One, you parents are not putting your kids to sleep the proper way, and they change it every 5 years because, of course, there's still SIDS despite the new technique.
Right.
Okay. And then sometimes they actually go as far as jailing the parents for actually murdering their kids, and their kids haven't murdered them because they find that the kids have when they do an autopsy, they find they have deep vein thrombosis and the brain is completely clogged. And so they say, well, these parents have had to do something monstrous to the kid, and the dad goes to jail even though he hasn't done anything. So I'm extremely cautious with this way because it's a very easy way to sway the entire population to point fingers at gays having AIDS, um, people who have anal cancer getting, performing anal
Hmm.
sex or whatever. Okay, you see it. There's very few illnesses that they're not tying to some kind of of you know um,
Lifestyle choice, if you
yeah, life. Yeah,
will.
it's yeah,
Kind of the right
exactly.
word there.
You drink too much, you smoke too much, etc. So let me. So that's the first point I like to make. I try to on the obesity. It wasn't natural to me. I wrote my book and I didn't have any chapter on obesity. And then one night that red flag hit me, and I was like, Mark, you missed that. That's impossible. So let me go back. What's what's really interesting with the bolus theory is there's one thing that you can be certain is the bolus once it's inside, it's going to be a chaotic movement, right? It's going to go places. Um, but you know that somebody who's been harmed will most likely have more probabilities of also being harmed elsewhere than somebody who hasn't,
Right.
right? I call it collateral, bolus collateral. I call it bolus collateral. And just to give you a hint as to how powerful it is, I went to autism. I didn't know anything about autism, which is a pretty complex, condition. And I said, okay, well, if these moms are correct and their kids have been harmed by the vaccine, and it's the bolus, then I can I can be certain that I can state a few things,
Hmm.
hypotheses that have to be true, and that's because I know that when it hit the bolus, when it hit the amygdala here, it had to more often than not hit other places.
Right.
So I listed that these kids would have more vision problems,
Mm.
blindness problems,
Yep.
hearing problems, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, ALS, endocrine disorders. I listed like 10 different hormones, and they would have the hyposecretion of these hormones because of microperforation, or they would have hyposecretion, so you're not producing any hormones because of necrosis. So that was already like 25 um, different hypotheses that needed to be true for the bolus to be true. And then I listed that you would have congenital heart disease, you would have celiac, you would have obesity, you would have cancer, you would have genetic disorders. I came up with 40. They all came out true, 100%. So 2 to the power of 40, that's 1.1 trillion combinations.
Yeah, that was in your first article about that, right? In
Yeah,
Substack.
that's one of my
Yeah.
articles. Yeah, not my first, but
That, that's
it's
that's that's what led me to you there when I was reading that. I was like, that's very, and I've actually got another study. I don't know if you've seen the one they had on Epic Times, but it's got 2,700 kids and about 560, 200, 2,700 that are vaccinated, and then 561 that are not in a pediatrician's practice, and it shows the exact same thing that you have.
yeah, and so what's very interesting is that often you have obesity is there, right? So, for example, people who have cancer often have obesity also. Oh, strange. They say, oh, it's the treatment. Okay, well, prove it. Not very clear. You have people who have arteriosclerosis also have a lot of obesity. So I was like, well, it looks like it looks like my bolus collateral is also working for other conditions. Um, and then I said, okay, so why obesity? You know, why would people become obese because of the bolus? And it hit me. It's so obvious. It's so obvious, but I hated myself for being so slow. Um, really, I'm a slow thinker. I'm a systemic thinker. It takes me a little while to. But here's the thing. You're perfectly correct. These people eat too much. Okay, so a kid who's in Silicon Valley and whose mother is feeding him kale every day, he's going to have problems of inflammation, but he won't be obese. Okay, but he'll have leaky gut problem. Now,
Right.
why is he going to have leaky gut problem? Because he's got a leaky gut. Because leaky gut is exactly microperforation.
Hmm.
It's what I'm talking about. What is leaky gut? It's microperforation of the gut-blood barrier. And what happens is, depending on where it's at in the in the in the entire intestines, from the stomach down, the ileum, etc., you have there's a reason, all the molecules are being, are basically being, well, not the molecules, but the chemical, the gluten, etc., are being decomposed into peptides,
Right.
into proteins and stuff. And um, if ever some holes are there at a level they're not supposed to, well, none of them are supposed to be holes, but what you're going to have is you're going to have two things. One, the barrier is no longer there, so the body is no longer selecting what it needs.
Hmm.
Right? Remember, what you eat is ingested, but it's not integrated. I don't know if that's very
Yes.
clear.
No, no.
Now,
Well, that's what your intestines do, right? As it comes through the stomach, right? That's actually where the nutrients are coming out of.
yeah, so the nutrients are passing by, but it's a buffet. Our body is taking what it needs.
Right.
It's not, maybe it'll take a little more to store for winter, but it's not going to take the level of what we're seeing with obesity. That is a sign that doesn't exist in nature. It doesn't exist anywhere. That's a sign of something dysfunctional. Now, where I was really, what was very, very clear that's what happened is there's a huge odds ratio between obesity and leaky gut. Basically, you're obese, you've got a leaky gut, which makes a
But
lot of
was that
sense.
before or after? In other words, you're saying the vaccine caused that, but let's say you don't have that injury. Are you saying that you're going to be obese? Are you going to get leaky gut, then be obese?
Yes.
Okay. Whether it's vax or not.
Well, I don't know how you do that without a vax, to be honest,
Okay.
or
All right. That was really my
without some
question.
kind of poison.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Remember, it's very difficult to bypass the protection it has mathematically, to have little holes, of a few cells hitting exactly, or being hit in the same area and creating a hole, and the body not being able to mend that big enough. Um, that's impossible from a mathematical standpoint. So it's got to be a vaccine, maybe contrast agents, maybe some other drug that you've injected and that's killed cells in a concentrated way.
Gotcha.
But it's a bolus. But what's very clear is that um, it's a barrier. It's a physical barrier at the capillary level, right? Once it's gone, it's not doing its filtering work. So anything that's presenting is entering. So it would make sense that somebody who's overeating
Hmm.
or not eating properly would get obese, even if he's not necessarily eating a whole lot more than, I eat a ton. Okay. I'm slim. I eat a ton. I eat stuff that's not necessarily good, etc. I'm fine. My brother isn't. I always, my entire life was like, how come? And most likely is he's got leaky gut problems to a certain extent. Maybe he doesn't move as much as I do. Maybe there is some of that, but fundamentally, I think that's in the hypothesis. That's conjectural. I agree with you there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
I,
that's
I
that's kind
haven't
of
the
what I was
proof,
driving at. Because
but no,
right,
I don't have
sugar,
the proof of
insulin
that.
spiking, yada yada yada.
Yeah,
There's a saying in the bodybuilding world, you can't out train a bad diet, right?
yeah, it's for sure. I don't see how that it could be happening. It's not natural that the body would not select. Okay, we've evolved for that. Let's be very clear. The obese have been eliminated from natural selection. Okay, there is no space for people to be obese in in the jungle. Okay,
Yeah.
you get
Well,
you
there
get
is
you get eaten alive
dessert.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So that means that our bodies have always taken what they needed and not more.
Gotcha.
Not more. So my take is, from my experience of living in the U.S., where Rocky Road's ice cream existed in 1977 when I was in San Francisco, and when I remember as a kid, I was arriving from France and coming there, I was like, wow, these alleys of ice creams. It hasn't changed that much. When I go back, I don't think people are eating much worse. But I agree. Now, if you've harmed people on top, if you've harmed people, if because look at autistic kids.
Hmm.
What people don't know about autistic kids is they have 40 other different conditions at the same time.
Right.
They have endocrine disorders, they have joint pain, muscle pain, celiac disease, gluten asthma. They have it all. Now, independently of autism, obese people also have these other things. They might not be, some of them are, there's a lot of autistic kids who are obese, by the way, right? But some of them are not, I think obesity is tied to vascular leakage and gut and leaky gut syndrome. I would bet quite a lot on that. Um, you know,
That's
I'm
that's
pretty
that's that's one thing we would depart on, but then I have a bias going into it, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
I I
it's
see how that can cause that, right? But in America, it doesn't seem like that it's the predominant reason. But then again, see, I don't look at this the SIDS argument, for example. You didn't have a rush of this that is actually correlated, which so is the obesity to a certain extent, with the more vaccines on the schedule. Yeah,
yes, you have, of
people
course.
have been putting their babies down for sleep for eons, and they ain't been killing them by
They
putting them
have,
in
they
a crib
have.
that didn't
You
have
know
the
how many
right
people?
seal on it,
You
right?
you, you know how many kids die of SIDS in the U.S. every year?
It seems to be going. The last I looked, it's tracking one for one to the vaccine schedule, basically. Yeah,
Yeah, and they tried renaming SIDS with other.
yeah.
They've played a labels game. I wrote an article a year ago on that. Plays a quite horrible labels game to that. So you have what's really. I think that's when you called me up. I wrote an article whereby I was saying that we're running to the abyss. We're literally running to the abyss. As a society, especially the West, and the U.S. has maybe 10 years is ahead of 10 years to Europe, but Europe is following suit behind. With this acceleration of vaccine, what you're seeing is the entire society is sick, and the problem is that, again, is it conscious? Is it unconscious or subconscious? Whatever. What happened is the the medical establishment and the community overall has done a number of things. One, it's fragmented the accidents, the harm, and then it's normalized it. So now Guillain-Barré, which looks a lot like polio, by the way. I mean, so
Mhm.
you're wondering if polio was ever real, and it wasn't just a vaccine injury or an injection injury relabeled Guillain-Barré in a strange way. Um, but you still have Guillain-Barré today, right? And um, if you start aggregating them together. I was writing my introduction to the book the other day, and I was saying, if you stack up arteriosclerosis, one adult out of two in the U.S. has arteriosclerosis. That can't be natural. Okay,
Mm.
and arteriosclerosis is certainly not tied to cholesterol. When you
Absolutely,
look
absolutely.
when you look at the when you look at when you read the literature on arteriosclerosis, which is the number one cause of death in the U.S. today, okay, um, they tell you that the vascular system, the endothelial wall, has suffered an insult. Okay, which is exactly what I was describing. In a slightly less the topography, the way it's hit might be slightly different, and so it creates a different imbalance. Here it's calcification, and it's because you have this calcification of cholesterol and all sorts of other metabolic waste and amyloids and all sorts of other things stack up, and then you start having a clot, and need to have stent and stuff. But it's the same process. So if you start stacking them up together and you add cancer and you add celiac disease and you like asthma and you like joint pain and you like add obesity and all of that, then you get the real picture. And the real picture is offensive to the social contract. It's going back to your theme. It's a more political one, which I haven't delved into too much. But fundamentally, if society is starting to harm our families and our kids, something's wrong. The social contract is broken, and if as a collective group we don't recognize that, and we are connected, our self-preservation instincts are simply gone, as we've seen in the past 4 years, then we've got a problem. And that's where I think HBOT is really interesting, to try and tie the knot at the end. HBOT is a fantastic opportunity for all of us, and notably for doctors, because doctors have betrayed the society. Let's be clear: the vast majority, say 9%, 95% of
I
doctors.
don't even know where to stop on that subject, to be honest with you.
So
I can't believe it, but humans are humans.
yeah. I mean, but I mean, some were corrupt intellectually, some were corrupt financially, some were corrupt morally, some were lazy, probably a lot more lazy, but or too
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the majority, but yeah.
How do we get out of this mess? And one way we get out of this mess is by saying, okay, well, look, we've harmed. I believe that the vaccines have harmed 670 million people across the world,
I think
and
that
about 34 million Americans.
Yeah.
I believe 34 million Americans have been harmed. About 2 million Americans are going to have cancer. And there's between 800 and 1 million people who died in the U.S. because of the vaccines.
Now, are you saying that just from the COVID or from vaccines total? Because I think
No.
I think
COVID,
there's that many from
COVID didn't. If COVID killed 200,000 people, that's a big number.
Oh no,
The
no,
rest
I'm saying the COVID vaccine. No, if that white paper I wrote about that, COVID didn't kill anybody, hardly. Relatively speaking,
Yeah, it's
they had
200,000.
an
It's
average
not
of
no
about
anybody,
three.
but
Well, I say it had the average person in Italy was 3 comorbidities. The
yeah.
average person in the U.S. was 94.5. That's 94.5% had 2.6 comorbidities.
Yeah, no,
So
for sure.
you take out those numbers, and then the ones that you put in there that got run over by a car, you put in the numbers, the ones they murdered on a ventilator.
Yeah,
And we're talking normal-ish flu season. But that was that was the point of my blog was
my calculation is quite simple. There's about 5% of the shot that go IV. I think 100% of the
I've got
shot.
this chart here. Let's see if I can share it real quick. And you can explain it. Let's see. Show. All right. I'll try this. Did that work? Nope. I wanted to show you my screen that has your chart, the estimated percentage of the population.
You can click on share screen.
Oh, share screen. There it is. Okay. All right. So yeah. So let's share this and let you explain it. Can you see that?
Simple. Yeah, I mean it's yeah. Any chance you can make it a bit larger?
Um, I think that's
Yeah, that's by age group.
yeah, that's your age group, 18.6, 14.9.
Yeah. So basically, what I did is, it took me a little while to try and estimate by triangulation how many of these intra or vaccines are going intravenously.
Mhm.
Um, right now, I'm pretty convinced that 100% of them are going intravenous, uh, be, because you're always going to cut through veins and venous and stuff. And there's this is fluid dynamics, and
Right.
so because of fluid dynamics, as the around the tip of the needle, the vaccine fluid is going to create a sort of a sphere and expand like that. And if ever there's a hole in one of the venous above, um, the vaccine is going to go and enter directly the bloodstream at high concentration.
Gotcha.
Now, I've written a simulation, a mathematical simulation. It needs to be within 3-4 millimeters of the tip for it to have a very significant potential.
Hmm.
But that's enough. That can actually do it. Now, I think from the studies on um, intramuscular injection of steroids by nurses, experienced nurses, we know it's around, at the minimum, 2% by cough. So it's probably, it's the reality of it is about 5% of injections are going intravascular and harming. We know from the same studies from 2015 that about 20% of those shots are more severe. So they have more immediate onset and they're more severe. So that means that 1% is actually getting a bigger dose, and a more severe dose. So when you do that and you multiply it by 2.5 or 2.4 shots, you end up with these levels of harm. um but I think this is for the not for COVID. This
Yeah,
is
no, this
for
is the one you just sent me, I think a couple of days ago. It's the estimated percentage of U.S. population harmed by inadvertent intravascular injection by age.
yeah,
Yeah,
in the past 40 years, right? So
right.
basically, I've
Yep.
taken age groups, number of
Yep.
shots they're supposed to take. I took 20% of the people, very high level guys, huh?
Uh-huh.
I took 20% of the people who'd be vaccine hesitant and would not get vaccinated. But that gives you an idea. You see that you have like a 16, 17, 18%, the younger generation being more harmed
Right.
because they've had a bigger schedule. Um,
Probability's higher. They got double the shots than somebody who's 60, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so what you see is about 15 to 20% of the population has been harmed clinically. That's crazy.
Yes.
That's a crazy, and that kids, almost all, the kids, here you have 60% of the kids who are below 20 who
Hmm.
have been harmed. We're harming our kids. It's crazy. Now, I here I want everybody to realize that what I'm saying is it's not anti-vax, pro-vax. It's saying the protocol, the delivery protocol, is supposed to be injection into the tissue, into the muscle tissue. So what I'm saying is, 5% of the time, at least 5% of the time, we're not complying to the protocol.
Correct.
This is like saying airliners, yeah, who cares? Who cares if 5% of the pilots are not certified? Okay. And you start seeing
Only
planes
plan.
drop and crash.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you think many people will continue taking planes? No. So here it's the same thing. again, I don't care if the vaccines are useful or not. What I
Right.
do care is their harm. Now, I'm taking a lot of negative criticisms from the resistance camp, or call it anti-vaxxer camp or my camp,
Mhm.
whatever, because what I'm saying is that the pharma, the vaccinologists, did a good job with the dose. The dose, I mean, even though Moderna is on the high side, when I benchmarked it against venom. I benchmarked the vaccines against bee venom.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I just just the weight factors. So,
Hmm.
are we ballpark figure? You know, is this obscene what they did? And when I looked into it, it was not obscene at all. I mean, it's actually the Pfizer vaccine is actually a fourth or a fifth or of a in terms of weight
Hmm.
of bee sting, and you can get stung by 10 bees if it's intramuscular
Right.
without it being a problem. So but if a bee stings you in a vein and you're not close to a hospital or a pharmacy, you're dead. You have 5 or 6 minutes.
So that leads me to something that you talked about with Norman, that last couple things here. The way in the medical community, they should be embracing you, actually, is what they should be doing, because you're not talking about the products. Actually, Big Pharma, this is, remember where I think we had our discussion via email. I said, I don't understand how Pfizer or somebody has not already picked up your book, published it, because this would be their amazing defense. Because the CDC actually told people not to aspirate during the COVID, because they wanted less pain, is what I understand, people to get less pain, so it would reduce vaccine hesitancy. Had you heard that?
Yeah, it's factual. I mean, they've actually for some reason, some nurses in the past 20 years have been advocating to end aspiration, but they didn't replace it. And it's quite amazing. When I wrote an article on that on bodybuilders, and the bodybuilders they have a whole protocol because, of course, when they get trend cough, if your readers want to, if you're, if the viewers today want to go on the internet and type tren cough, TREN cough, it's what happens to bodybuilders when they inject intravenously, uh, and the steroids get to the lungs, and they basically collapse because they can't breathe any longer.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
and so the bodybuilders have a whole protocol to avoid that. And the way they do it is they aspirate. Aspirate probably doesn't work very much. It really can work if it's done right. If you really pull a lot on the plunger,
Hmm.
and the vessel is very, very close, so it can probably work for the most brutal ones, the anaphylactic shock ones, where people die within 2 minutes or something. Um, but
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
it most likely doesn't work for the rest. But what's interesting is that the bodybuilders added a number of things. They reduced the dose. They've diluted the dose, so they're injecting a bit more liquid, but it's more diluted, and
Hmm.
they're injecting extremely slowly. And so when you inject
Hmm.
very slowly, you create a very flat, long bolus,
Right.
and you're going to limit the damage. Um, it's certainly not sufficient. Ideally, we were discussing about that earlier. I think uh, the delivery of intramuscular vaccines and others needs to be reviewed, and either a patch technology or a pressure gun technology. They also need to be validated for bolus, because there's other ways to create a bolus sometimes. But
Hmm.
fundamentally, you need to change that, uh, because it's you can't harm 5% of the kids every time you shoot. And remember, some of these kids are getting like 50 or 60 shots by the time they're 5. Now, I wanted to add something. We've talked about adverse events on the vascular system, but we haven't talked about genetic disorders and cancer. And I want to talk about two things. Genetic disorders and cancer are apparently related to a transfection of stem cells. And that's a big problem because stem cells are normally hidden away, and there's not a ton of them circulating in our bodies. But a pregnant woman and an infant is loaded with stem cells for the very reason that a human being is being constructed, right? So vaccinating a pregnant woman is a heresy. It's a crime. Okay, I'm going to be very honest with you here. It's a crime. You have to be utterly. I remember a discussion with Roger Hodkinson who's a pathologist from Canada, who's been very vocal about this 3 years ago. 3 years to this day, even more than 3 years ago. I was on a call with him and a few others at Panda, and he was outraged and saying, you could not, vaccinate pregnant women, and you're going to create infertility. And I actually wrote an article on infertility because I think infertility, all the signs of infertility, the growth of infertility, which is now almost 13% of the world population is sterile. It's crazy. Is also tied to accidental vaccine bolus injection, basically.
Yeah.
And injecting. So going back to the point I was making is, if kids are, full developments between 0 and 5, I think vaccines should not apply to kids. Okay, because they're loaded with, and so there's a huge chance, even if you have the right delivery technique, there's a huge chance you're going to give cancer to these kids through the stem cells that are circulating in their bodies.
Well, they're right. So the way I understand it from listening to Gert van der Bosch and reading some of that stuff, right? Their innate system, kind of like with the pregnant mother, is on turbo, right, to protect themselves until they get acquired immunity to some of these things that are out there.
Yeah, but it's not really the problem here. Here, the problem is contaminating stem cells. The immune system can't do anything about it. Okay, and the innate immune cells either. Here, the problem is more of a question of probability of a meeting, right? Mm-hmm. If in a normal adult like you and I, we don't have tons of stem cells circulating. They're hidden away. They're creating a ton of it of white cells and red blood cells in the bone marrow, and then they're hidden away in the organs, depending on the type of organs, and it's hard for them to be harmed. But in a developing body, mm-hmm. A newborn, an infant, a toddler, etc., he's got, he's growing like, I mean, I don't know if you have children.
Yes, I do.
Well, if you have children, you see how fast they grow, and therefore this contamination and the risk of cancer and genetic disorders is big during those times.
Because you're attacking, in essence, those stem cells that are not hidden, is basically what you said, right?
Exactly. The probability of a meeting are much higher, independently of a bolus.
Gotcha. Well, I kind of, and so in layman's terms, I kind of think that's what Gert was kind of referring to, in the sense that if you've got all those stem cells going on, right, then that means your innate immune system is, say, more active. Because that's what they're there for, is to fight and kill those things as well, along with T cells and what have you.
Oh, but yeah, but that's, I mean, that's, well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Gert, but
Okay.
we
Well, no, see,
disagree on a lot of things.
what I'm trying to do is, because I'm learning this,
So,
go read
so no, but
what makes
so
sense
here's the
from
thing.
certain people.
Here's the thing. There's a ton of stem cells building immune cells in the bone marrow. That
Hmm.
doesn't change much for kids. They're not circulating. Okay, that's
Gotcha.
bone marrow. The stem cells are there. They're producing white cells, so immune cells
Uh-huh.
and red cells for breathe, etc.
Right.
That's not very different. An adult I mean, there's difference in maturity. What you were talking about is,
Right.
and Gert is talking about, is maturity. That's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is you're building a new body,
Hmm.
and it's growing very quickly, and so you have circulating stem cells in the body much more than you would have
Gotcha. Okay. That
without
I
it.
misunderstood that. That was my bad.
Okay.
I heard you say
No,
that.
no, it's okay. It's not
Process.
necessarily straightforward, and I haven't vocalized it enough. So my apologies here.
No, no, that
Um,
was all me because once you said it, then it clicked. Sometimes I have to hear it, as my dad would say, I got to tell you twice everything. So,
but there is a lot of what's the logic is very much biophysics.
mhm.
It's all physics. It's not microbiology.
Exactly.
Very, and that's why a lot of these folks have problems understanding what's happening because it's more about um, um, quantity. Is it material or not? In biology, they keep talking about all sorts of things, but they're never quantifying them. So in that kind of the world, with that, you can imagine anything,
Hmm.
see it happen at a micro level, but it never materializes into anything, and so it's completely irrelevant. Biophysics is what's interesting is if you start from what's happening. Of course, at one point you need to understand why the T cells are attacking. That's biochemistry or that's biology. But the reality of it is you need to understand the numbers and the quantities to understand the relevancy, right? And here the relevancy is clearly, in many cases there's an imbalance. So there's too much coagulation factor that's overwhelming the the coagulation inhibitors. When
Hmm.
that occurs, you get thrombosis. Now, yesterday night, I was exchanging with my friend Steve Kirch, and he was telling me, so like, is your theory, does it work with the fact that, sometimes the blood coalesces outside the body and not inside the body? And I said, yeah, it's just a question of balance. If you've got tons of coagulation factor in the heart in the blood, because a lot of harm has occurred, but but the but the coagulation inhibitors are sufficiently wide, and well allocated on the walls of the vessels, your blood is not going to coagulate. But when you're going to take it out, which was the case of Milo Edberg, a poor 6-year-old who got injected in his blood port, the vaccine, his blood
Just
was
say that again.
coagulating.
They injected it by accident, I hope.
Well, okay. So what happened was there's a kid who was 6 years old at the time. I think it was December 2021. It's called Milo Edberg. He's a child who who was born from a crack mother, I
Hmm.
think, and his foster or his adopting mother was has taken care of him, adopted him and taken care of him apparently very well. But he's been suffering from a lot of illnesses, and he was having a lot of problems. Most likely sugar related, so diabetes related, most likely.
Hmm.
Um, and so the day they installed the blood port to take blood regularly, the doctor decided to inject the vaccine directly there. He most likely knew it was stupid what he was doing because he didn't feel
Well, he will when he spends the rest of his life in jail.
well. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that, but fundamentally, he did that. He most likely did it slowly, but he injected the entire dose. And so the poor child had, the very night was in the hospital. His lungs were damaged. He had myocarditis. I just read the story. I think he was paralyzed, and he was in a coma for a month and a half or so. And in the articles they state that the the people who were drawing blood had
Mhm.
to bring the lab in his room to be able to analyze the blood before it coagulated.
Ouch.
Okay, so that was happening. So it's just a question of imbalances.
That kind of proves your hypothesis to a certain degree, right?
Oh yeah, it's all
Sadly, but yeah.
white clot syndrome.
Yep.
This also the taste in the mouth. A lot of people have been testifying that they had an immediate metal taste in the mouth. It's well recognized in the medical community, and I found an article on Poland from 1936 that was showing exactly that. They said, "Oh, it was a case report of a person who almost died," and they basically said, "Well, he had the shot, he had a taste in the mouth, or whatever taste Poland is, and he immediately collapsed." So it's the fact that the bolus goes intravenous is a certainty. The fact that it goes to the mouth and the tongue is not necessarily certainty. But
Right.
there's a lot of people who have been talking about an immediate taste in the mouth. A lot of people. I think Jessica Rose, my friend Jessica, had done an analysis for me a few months back where she had found, I think more than 6,000 people had an immediate taste in the mouth. I don't remember if it's 6,000 or 4,000, but it's a big number. A very big number of people had testified to. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the chart there that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. How much is it? How much does it say? Is it 4,000?
So it doesn't have an actual number on it. Rate of A's. It's actually interesting. Of course, I understand you're young, you're not going to know it, and you're old, you may not know it.
Yeah, you might not. You might not also.
Your taste buds are fried, or you're fried.
Yeah,
Brain's fried from all the other stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say, but I mean the thing is, physics guarantee that you're going to have an intravenous injection. It guarantees it. After that, it's just a question of of distance and size. So it's a Russian roulette. From there on, it's a domino effect um, on the vascular damage side of things. Everything is proven. Everything is consistent with scientific laws of the bolus. The bolus is a technique to deliver high concentration drugs to organs. That's how you do contrast agents into the brain. You don't do it too quickly. You have to watch out because you can do damage there too. But that's the way you deliver a lot of drugs. So it's known. And after that, transfection, that's the mechanism of the action of the vaccine. Um, Destruction by T cells, that the mechanism of action of the vaccines, and it's immunology 101. And the rest is just pure good old logic. If you destroy too much of it, coagulation.
So let me ask you a question that a black belt would ask outside this. Could you, how shall we say, convince, or in my mind, actually trick the pharmaceutical industry to giving, let's say, antibiotics, for example? I would assume that the bolus effect, if you get an antibiotic shot, then you could take blood within the next hour or so, and show your chart almost exactly that it would show that much in the blood system. Does that make sense? Am I phrasing that correctly?
You mean in the IV?
Yeah. If you could go take some blood, let's say an hour, 2 hours after you got an antibiotic shot, right? Or has there ever been your studies that you've read?
It's been done. There's it's been done. There's no question there that it goes in very. I mean, there's the mice study.
Hmm.
The mice study from Pfizer actually shows it goes intravenously. But the problem is that shows a slow
Right.
trickle via the vascular system. There's most likely some of it in the first 15 minutes. There's a ton of it going there, which
Hmm.
is very surprising. So it most likely is that first shot I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
Uh, but after that is trickle. The dangerous aspect is the magnifying glass aspect for that first 30 seconds. That's the thing that's very dangerous. After that, the bulletproof vest concept takes over, and it's okay. And that's thank God. You know, I have one of my son is vaccinated, and he was sick at one point. I thought he thought he might have a vaccine injury, and I had him tested, and he was fine. He was pristine. So you can get injected with these vaccines and be healthy. That's also very a sign of hope. Some people now think they have a
Shroud
downside
over 'em. Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's enough people. I mean, out of the 670 million people who have been harmed across the globe, and the 128 that have been harmed seriously, quite a bit of those, probably half of the 128, are going to die in the next 5 years. So about 60 million, most likely, something like that.
That's
Um,
it's sad to hear you say that, but that's what I predicted back when I wrote that white paper in July. I was like, the branch Covidians are going to be responsible for more deaths than communism was in the
yeah, yeah.
20th century. Easily, easily.
Yeah, of course, and that's for sure. And the other part is that's the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Okay, uh,
The
that's the
birth
tip of the
rates are going to
iceberg, and
be,
so many people, young people, who are going to live a life
yep.
of pain, and whose lives have been destroyed, and some can be saved with oxygen therapy.
Hmm.
Um, uh, some can be saved from cancer, certainly with other treatments, um, but some won't. Some won't. But I think the what's really interesting, understanding, for example, that Parkinson's and Alzheimer's are related. I wrote a piece 2 years ago now on microperforation and the link between BBB leakage and neurodegenerative disease, and um, and being in a capacity to tell people, look, if you had a stroke, or if your head was hurting after you had the vaccine, maybe you should get hyperbaric oxygen therapy a bit to make sure that you repair potential leakage and you don't get Alzheimer's, because there's about 500,000 new Alzheimer's cases every year in the
Hmm.
U.S., and I think this is going to make it a whole lot worse. So I think we're going to go to something like 800,000.
Let me a quick question on that, because actually I have someone in the close family that's been diagnosed recently. They said they didn't have the markers for it. See, this is and what when they told me that, I was like, I'm not so sure I believe they actually know what the markers are, quote unquote, genetic markers for Alzheimer's.
There's no genetic markers, but go and read if you haven't read it. It's I need to make it you know modernize it, update it, basically. But go and read my article on poking holes into the blood-brain barrier.
Okay.
The the science and the research is pretty clear from hundreds of autopsies that neurodegenerative disease in the brain is caused by a leak in the blood-brain barrier, and it makes sense, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you would have degeneration because the barrier is no longer working. It's just common sense,
Yep.
You're,
That's what so much of this is. That's why I'm
yeah,
surprised
yeah, yeah.
the
No, but
medical community
you're
misses
wondering,
so much of it.
now the whole question was, there's some certain researchers that are saying it was stress. There's a lot of, it was interesting. I was reviewing a U.S. Senate investigation on, I think, Desert Storm vaccine accidents. Or I don't remember if it's, well, I mean, Gulf War vaccine accidents, and it was really interesting because there's this man who was clearly vaccine harmed, who was quoted in the document for saying that, I'm okay if it's stress related, but I never even went to Iraq.
Well, did he get a Purple Heart? That's the question.
Basically, the guy never was stressed because he had the vaccine in the U.S., got sick from the vaccine very quickly, right. And then they said he was stressed. That's why he was having these these neurodegenerative disease. Now it's well documented that it's the leaky BBB, a blood-brain barrier, that precedes the illness, and it's the location of the leak that dictates the type of illness. So if it's in the white and gray matter, you're going to have Parkinson's. If it's in the basal ganglia, you're going to have Parkinson's, and so on.
Gotcha.
So it's the good news is oxygen therapy can solve that. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is complicated. There's only 150 centers in the US, very few in Europe also. It's growing, but there are people using sort of intermediate with sort of tanks where you have 1.3 or 1.4 atmospheres that can work and you can do at home. But I think the way is going to be either these mobile tents that bring up a bit the oxygen level, or normal baric, just breathe at 100% or 96% oxygen via a concentrator at home for probably 80 hours, during over 3 months or 2 months.
That sounds like an opportunity for an entrepreneur.
Well, there's plenty of people selling that stuff. So
doing it already. Okay.
Yeah. There's plenty of people selling that stuff. I'm providing them with a reason why it's working. And I think from a political standpoint, it's the way out for doctors,
right,
that have failed us, to regain our trust. I really, really believe that if doctors continue, taking a stance that this doesn't work, that only pharma works, and they instead of having our back and trying to sort the mess they've put people in, that's the way to it. And the future. What's also interesting. I was talking about that the other day. Is when you look at the Amish community in the U.S. who are not vaccinated or essentially they don't have all these illnesses. Okay.
Absolutely.
So oxygen therapy is a way to overhaul the entire population at levels that we haven't seen for 50 years. And notably our kids, because the kids have been damaged the most. The people who are below 25 years old have been damaged more than our generation, us, near the 60s.
62 for me.
Okay, well, I'm 5 years younger.
Check.
I'm coming there a bit fast. I'll never retire because I'm broke as hell. But
well, to that end, so you're still looking for a publisher, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm looking for a publisher, or I'm going to self-publish very quickly, because
gotcha.
I'm looking for a publisher. I'm looking for I'm looking for apostles also. I have a few people who are amazed at the bolus theory, because it's the first time you have a unified theory that can explain, I can explain infertility as a unified,
Hmm.
I can explain it. I can explain autism. I can't explain everything about autism, but I can explain a lot of things. Um, and so I'm getting a lot of pushback from the resistance,
There's
or
always
team reality
resistance to
supposedly.
change. You know that.
Um, and I've received it, and it's funny because 3 years ago I immediately started saying there's this T cells are going to attack endothelial cells if it goes into the vascular system, and everybody was telling me, no, Michael, why would that do? And it's like, well, that's why
They're
they
transfected.
were that's the mechanism of action of those vaccines for cancer. So that's what's going to happen. There's
Uh,
no question. And it took about 2 years for Robert Malone and Brett Weinstein, et cetera, to get on board stuff. Now they're doing that. They're saying that,
hmm
which is great. But we're very far from the acknowledgement of that uh, you can explain every single one of the accidents in a very precise way. I don't know if you read the article I wrote last week on two teenagers who died of a heart attack, and within 2, 3, 4 days after the the shots, and it was funny. It was Nick Hudson who sent me that. Says, "What how does that fit with your theory?" And it was very interesting because the heart was basically contracted so much that the kids died. It had what calls contraction bands, and that happens when you get a high dose of epinephrine.
hmm
In Europe, it's adrenaline. Um, and the thing is, they never got a high dose of epinephrine. And so, where did that come from? Well, it came out of the adrenal glands
hmm
that were made porous, that were made permeable, and adrenaline, most likely 2 nanograms of adrenaline, were injected into the blood and killed those kids. I can explain. It's. I haven't found yet anything that's not explainable through the Bullis theory.
So, in your book, do you cover the patch, using the patch, like I believe you said you were using in some cancer research when you were talking to Norman?
I no, I leave it open. I basically say we need to investigate. There's different possibilities that can work. Uh, I I don't want to rush into anything. Rushing is always bad, as you know. So what I state is, one, we need to freeze everything. We need to stop injecting intramuscular vaccines to kids
Mhm.
now,
Right?
because we're damaging those kids every day. And every day, parents are losing their kids or having Guillain-Barré or other autistic kids. I mean, 5% of kids in California have ASD syndrome. It's total lunacy. I mean, are we parents? Are we here to protect our children, or are we? So the first thing is stop everything,
hmm
and then basically investigate what are the best ways. It's not very complicated. There's different ways you can do it. The problem is, first you need to. It's also a culture thing, as you know. It's
Yes.
often important. People need to understand that injecting intramuscularly a vaccine is a medical procedure that
hmm
is extremely dangerous. This is not, giving candies and
mm
doing and going brutally, pushing on the plunger like you're injecting water
Yep.
is crazy. So there's a culture change that needs to happen, as to people who inject these products need to understand they hold the lives of the people they're injecting into their hands. That's the first point. After that, there's different ways. um, Patches are a possibility. I haven't looked into the dynamics of it. I don't know how that works. I don't know if there's not a risk of something else. So but patches on, at least from a bolus standpoint, looked like a good idea. You can also do pressure guns that sort of inject with pressure over a large surface of the skin.
Isn't that what the smallpox was, or was that needles? The one where you got the mark? I
I
noticed you were
don't
talking about that
know
with
if they,
Norman.
I don't know if the smallpox I didn't have a needle. I know that the one we were using at the firm I used to work for was a pressure gun.
Hmm.
I think it's called from PharmaJet, and it didn't have a needle. It was just pure pressure.
Gotcha.
And so, in that sense, and it had two benefits. If you inject into the skin, you can reduce the dose by 1,000
Mm.
or at least 100. Why? Because the skin is loaded with immune cell.
Right.
That's where stuff that's coming to attack you comes is in the skin or in the mucus. It's not in your deltoid.
Yeah, well, and I never thought about that till you mentioned that with Norman. You guys were talking about that. And I was because the nasal rinse was proven about 850% effective against COVID. That alone, because that's where it's replicating, right? This
Of course.
washing your hands is doing almost nothing. It's not
Yeah,
replicating
rinsing
per
your
se.
nose, and it's been known by humans for 2,000 years.
No, the NIH published a paper on it. I was reading it in like 85 or something as protocol for flu season.
Of course, of course, if you if you rinse your nose, even just with plain water, if you can add soda, baking soda, a small spoon of baking soda to make it even a bit more potent, and you do that twice a day when you go out. Your kids come back to school, or you come back from the outside world or whatever. And I do that all the time because I have allergies, so I use it all the time. But yeah, it's a very the solutions are simple. But for the vaccine, if you want to continue doing it, patches, very slow injection if you continue using a needle. But I think needles need to go.
Is there a better spot on the body or not where you stand a smaller chance? Common
No,
sense would almost say no, but
no,
that's
I don't think so.
don't think so.
Everything
Okay.
is vascularized. If you have a needle, I mean, there's you know, I've spoken to many nurses who read me, and some were saying they had statistics that were very, very scary um, when they were aspirating. So some were saying I never hit it. Some were saying I was hitting once out of two.
Oh
Um,
goodness.
so uh, I think fundamentally you can't escape injecting intravenously if you have a needle. Um,
Well,
and
how about depth? Because I mean, just breaking the skin. If the current methodology is going to be used, obviously you're increasing the likelihood of hitting a vessel with every centimeter that you go, right? So it would stand to reason, probability wise, that the less depth of the shot, almost like a gauge where you would put on, and so it wouldn't go in too far, that you would reduce that
except
probability.
subcutaneously, you have plenty of vessels also, and big ones. So I think the needle needs to go, or if there's a needle, it needs to be a smaller dose and over 3 or 4 minutes. Very, very, very slow.
Hmm.
There are some people who are talking about micro needles.
Hmm.
Uh, Micro needles done over 2 minutes, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that would help. But the more needles you have, the more chances you have of hitting a vessel. So
Yeah, it seems to me the patch would be the best way to go, right? Because
yeah,
and
the
that's
patch or
everybody
the
saw the
pressure
nicotine.
gun. The pressure gun also is not bad. The pressure gun looks like it's working. But yeah, this needs to be there. An overhaul needs to happen, and the study needs to be done. And as always, I mean, this is you know me coming from the automotive world. When this whole started, I was appalled because I was like, these guys are not used. They don't understand. The quality standards of the pharma industry versus. I'm sorry to say that to my pharma friends.
Yeah.
versus the automotive world are sub-zero. I mean, they're really, really crap.
Yeah. The
Um,
same with hospitals, to be honest with you.
it's I remember when um, Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, when she was summoned to come to Congress a few years back, um, I think it was for 16 or 13 ignition switches who had
Mhm.
ignited.
Yeah.
Um, and she was treated like if she was a felon. I was appalled. I mean,
Yes.
I've worked a bit with Mary a few years back. I was appalled how they treated her. I mean, 13 out of 100 million cars,
Right. Yeah. On a spring, I believe
and
it was, if I'm not
and
mistaken.
and and each car is at least 20,000 parts. So you do the math. It's just colossal, and it's not even one in a million failure. When pharma and the medical, the public health authorities are getting one shot every 20
Mm.
going intravascular. I mean, we're in a different planet here.
Yes.
I've been saying, to many people, I've been saying, if on January 15th, when you know when all the data was in there showing something was wrong,
Hmm.
they had stopped everything. The FDA and the CDC, or whoever, most likely the FDA, would have stopped everything. And they would have put a black belt Six Sigma Toyota guys on this. After a week or two, not only would have had what I found,
Hmm.
but had a solution. It's you have all the data, you look into it, you do the map, etc. It took me a lot of time because, first of all, it's not my domain. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a doctor,
Right.
um, and I didn't have access to all the data. Uh, but I had most of the thing done a while back. After that, I tried to understand every single illness out there, and I do. And what really hit me is when I started, I said, okay, well, this is killing people, but I didn't have a sense of how many people were being harmed. And
Right.
then I realized we'd been doing that for 50 years, um, and it explains a lot of things. I remember being really traumatized by a doctor when I had my first son, telling me how I was supposed to put him in bed. When I realized 30 years later that they were just lying to me, and they were putting no, but imagine the blame. You're blaming the parents when
Hmm.
that occurs to
Yep.
you. You lose a child, which is already a horrendous experience, and then you think that it's because your fault because you misplaced the kid when you put him to bed, and you're
Hmm.
25 years old or whatever your age when you get it. It's a trauma for life, and it's not your fault.
Oh yeah. No, I remember being paranoid about that with my son. I'm like, it would just drive you crazy.
Yeah,
They got the beeper, the walkie talkies now, and all that stuff. You know,
yeah. We
how,
didn't have
how,
that.
how
We
did
well, we
how did
had
he
no watch.
survive
We
when they
didn't have
threw him?
cameras at the time, but yeah. But
Uh,
so it's. I think we need to we need to change the paradigm, the medical paradigm across the globe. Um, we need to get from a pharma-centric
mhm.
healthcare system to health or to a patient-centric
Yep.
healthcare, and also I think the reward needs to be backwards. So you need to completely change the way. Today, the sicker you are, the more the richer the doctor becomes.
Yep.
That's that's a misalignment of incentives. I mean, again, for people who are in business, like you and I, that's not the way we should incentivize doctors. You should incentivize doctors by telling them, look, we're giving you a cohort, wherever in geography,
Hmm.
um, and you're going to keep that cohort healthy, right?
Yep.
Whenever someone of these guys are unhealthy, your revenue drops.
Yes.
Okay, so whatever, $300,000 or $400,000, if everybody's pristine and everything, and whenever somebody's it gets cancer, whenever somebody becomes obese, whenever somebody has cardiovascular disease, you solve it or you lose. And today it's the opposite. Today it's the opposite. The more drugs they give, the more money they make. The more appointments they get, the more money they
Hmm.
make, and
Yep.
and, and I think that's the wrong incentives.
Well, they're
Um,
treating, in my opinion, they're treating the symptom and not the root cause. Back to what
yeah.
that's the whole thing here with the bolus theory. Is you need to start driving back to root cause, and this is just not what they do. They don't train. I put a lot of this right, so we take some of the same biblical worldview as you train up a child in the way it should go, and it won't depart from it. Well, you're not training up these doctors to think. You're training them to regurgitate garbage in, garbage out. And back to your point, I mean, in the say a Gulfstream, for example, if you're an inspector, you get that plane when it comes to the flight line, and guess what? When it takes its first flight, you're on it. You've got some incentive to make sure it's done right, right?
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
I, I think, here's my humble opinion. I think you should, but because the thing is, and you may self-publish, and this is what I was telling you about with as much as I hate to give Pfizer or any of these guys any protection, is they should take your book and run with it. Because whenever there's going to be a lawsuit anywhere, you have written the legal defense for them, good, bad, or indifferent. And it's the
Well,
math and the
there's some of
math.
the stuff. There's some of the stuff they did, which is, I mean, I got carried away emotionally sometimes. So I'm all positive. The fact that they've pushed for children vaccination is criminal. Let's be
Oh,
very
yes. Oh,
clear.
yeah. Well,
It's criminal. Kids were not hurt.
yeah.
They did. I use this analogy. Do you know the gorilla basketball story?
Yeah. We played that in green belt and black belt training.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, that's what they did. So it's amazing. I mean, they played a trick which is unethical. Let's be honest.
Yes. Oh, well,
Um,
absolutely.
and here's what it was. And I was appalled when I heard it. What did they do? They the people who were suffering from COVID
Hmm.
were mostly elderly,
Yes.
or people who had, who were extremely sick. But fundamentally, people who were dying, who had severe COVID, had delayed in their immune reaction, most likely because they have a lack of dendritic cells, um, and and vaccines would never help them, right? Because in
Absolutely.
fact, because vaccines are dependent on an extremely, you know, effective or efficient immune system. If it's dysfunctional, vaccines are useless.
That's it's that was my exact observation. Is the how you say high risk patients are the last people you need to be given these to, especially when they're not. And you're talking about with the children too. But Norman mentioned this, and that's when I went and did my value stream map, if you will, from 1976 forward with the swine flu. That
Yeah,
basically tells you first, it's not the flu vaccine. It's not a vaccine. It's an immunity booster, and it's for a variant that is long gone. And I don't know. I've heard numbers: 60 to 70% of the genome of every flu is the same. So
yeah,
you already have, in essence, partial acquired immunity, kind of like he
yeah,
was
yeah. Of
talking
course.
about with the TB, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah. Of course, of
and,
course.
and the biggest piece of damning data to me. So setting aside the bolus, right? The biggest piece of damning information for me on the mRNA COVID shot, whether it be the spike or whatever's causing it, aside from the bolus, is that 96 of 104 pregnant women under 13 weeks had a spontaneous abortion. And that's their words in the trials, not mine.
No, but it's obvious that some people. I'm not saying, there's obviously some very good people at Pfizer and all these companies. They're not all bad people,
Oh,
but
oh,
there
yeah.
are people. there are people who have a huge responsibility pushing uh, the fact that socially we're letting you do some stuff. If it's ethically wrong, you shouldn't be doing it. Now, here's let me finish on the gorilla and the ball. For those of you who don't know, that's it's
Sorry about that.
basically if you focus on the ball, you don't see there's students throwing a ball at each other, and your task is supposed to be counting the number of throws or passes, and at the same time a gorilla comes in and does all sorts of stupid things, and because you're counting the ball, you're not seeing the gorilla. Pfizer and Moderna did exactly that on the COVID. Let me tell you how they did this. What they did is they started saying, "Oh, your parents are going to die. We're going to build a vaccine. It's going to save them."
Yep.
Then they tested the vaccines on anything but your parents. Right?
Mhm.
So there was like 4% of people who were elderly and nobody had comorbidities or whatever, which is standard because I've worked in a an anti-cancer vaccine company, and we didn't take anybody who was immunocompromised. You have to be stupid to do that. So of course they didn't do it, but they knew that the vaccine would not work, right? And so if they injected this only to people who didn't work,
Mhm.
it would have shown immediately. So what did they do? They said, well, everybody needs to have it. Which all these people, it's like me when I had COVID. I was sick. I had fever for 24 or 48 hours, but I was done in 2 days. I was a bit tired, but that was it. Normal flu. Um, so when they started doing that, they extended the usage of the vaccine to people who didn't need it, right?
Mhm.
Because they had the capacity to deal with it themselves. 99% of the people never needed to go to the hospital on their own. And and so after that, when the vaccines didn't work, well, they did two things. The ball changed, and they started saying, "Hey, your kids are in danger."
Mhm.
And so the moms who were afraid for their parents now were focused on their kids and
Yep.
were traumatized that their kids would die of COVID, which
Mhm.
was zero chance. There was
Yep.
zero chance of anybody dying of COVID, any of kids dying of COVID, zero. And and so the the focus went from I'm going to save my parents to I want to save my kids. I need vaccine for my kids. And then when the vaccine was not working for parents, for the grandparents, right? Then they said, "Oh, but the vaccine can't be 100% effective."
Well, it's not a vaccine. That's been my
But you
point
see the
all.
trick.
It's a
They
quote
went
unquote
from
immunity booster, but it doesn't even really boost your immunity for what that variant is that's here.
yeah, but it's a trick. They played a trick, and that was dishonest. And that I mean, just on those grounds, these vaccine companies should be investigated seriously, and their leadership be investigated and probably trialed. Whoever did all of that, including the lawyers who pushed all of that, injecting kids who didn't need it,
Hmm.
especially with trials that were non-trials, etc. That should be a criminal offense, especially since they knew that you were having accidents. That the trial of the first trial actually had 16 or 18 death in the vaccinated versus
Right.
14 for the others. So there were
Yep.
more deaths and more accidents
And they
in
hit
the
one of those
vaccine
people.
cohort.
They disappeared.
Yeah. That's not my field, but I know there's plenty of people who have done excellent work from Josh Gesgau in Jerusalem, my friend,
Hmm.
Jessica Rose, or Christine Coton here in France. They've done excellent work analyzing that. I've focused more on the science, the mechanism of harm, understanding it,
Hmm.
and became a monster, and a scary one because it explains most of the illnesses in the world today.
Gotcha. Mark, I want to thank you for coming in here and sharing with us. And for those out there, we're going to include your link to your Substack And I assume that once you get the book published, you'll put that out there somewhere. Do you have
Yeah,
a,
of
or
course.
just follow you on
First of all, I hope
Twitter
hopefully I'll be
X? But
invited. I'll be invited a whole lot more, and um, and it's really a no-brainer. Most of people who have common sense, the Bullish theory is it's complete no-brainer.
hmm
When I presented it to my friend Michael Leavitt, who's a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, who's a professor at Stanford. He didn't comment too much on he made two comments. He didn't comment
hmm
on the science, so I presume I did a good job. Um, um, he said, "Well, it's simple after all,"
It's
and it
very
is.
simple. It's actually that's what
It's
makes it
very
so
simple.
beautiful.
It's bypassing the immune system. Bypassing the protection of the body. Sorry. Um, and he said, "You're going to face a lot of resistance." So it's funny because I feel like a bit like Dr. Semmelweis. I have something that makes complete sense. It's a bit harder for me because I'm not a doctor, so I'm taking more crap. But he probably took a lot of crap
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I feel a
Yeah.
bit like
Because we can do simple math. This is not that complicated, right?
no, it's very simple. It's very simple. Anybody can understand it. And what's scary is it's a bit like you're I committed financial seppuku. Okay, I basically have been work. You work 4 years without paying yourself because you think what you're doing is so important. I was
hmm
managing. I'm managing to survive. Now I'm just drowning. It's completely crazy. I have an overdraft of several thousand euros. It's a mess, my life. But the thing was so big and huge to me that I had no choice morally. Even
hmm
though it was hard to sacrifice my family on the altar of others, basically. But now I feel a bit like that. Those what do they call those Baywatch swimmers?
Oh
When
yeah.
whatever they call it, safeguards or lifeguards.
Lifeguards.
When
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have lifeguards and you're trying to save somebody who's drowning, they try to kill you often
Yes, absolutely.
in the
First thing to do is
panic.
punch them and then drag them in.
Yeah, so I'm taking a lot of flack from a lot of people, a lot of hatefulness or hatred, um, when all I'm trying to do is help people's kids and save their kids. It's a very strange, weird experience. Uh, it's very satisfactory because it's eh, it's gratifying to have found something
hmm
or several things actually, a new theory, a cancer theory, this huge disaster, but also you know making it consistent with hyperbaric oxygen therapy and
Right.
bringing hope to people, and also being able to tell people, look, not everybody's going to get harmed. There's a reason,
hmm
it's okay, don't worry. So there's a lot of satisfaction to it. But if you're telling me, this is it's going to take you 4 years to be where I'm at today, which is still, Bose theory is hardly known. I mean, some people have been. Brett Weinstein talked about it on Joe Rogan.
Yep. And Tucker as well. He mentioned it, right?
I don't know when he mentioned. I didn't see it. I think he talked about it. I don't think he mentioned my name, but
No,
on
he didn't
Tucker.
mention your name on Tucker, but he did mention it on Tucker.
Yeah. No. So I mean, it's anyhow. It's the only theory that stands. Um, it is also nice from a society standpoint because it bridges the gap between the two camps,
hmm
right? But it's difficult for both camps to accept because the people who've made the mistake of trusting the system
hmm
have cognitive dissonance. It's hard to admit
Yes.
that you've taken a crazy risk and you didn't listen to other people.
Yep.
And on the other side, a lot of things have been thrown out uh, without doing the appropriate work.
hmm
So, you have people talking about amyloids, you have talking people about circulating spike protein
Right.
everywhere, etc.
Right.
And these have been, I debunked those a long time ago. Um, you need to do real science if you want to stay credible and stay for the long run. And I think that's also the problem with the doctors and the mainstream media, etc. If you're taking the shot and you're okay, then then whatever the anti-vaxxer are saying is got to be wrong.
Right. Well, and the strange thing is with the bolus theory, it's just a probability you're okay. It has
Exactly.
absolutely nothing to do with this specific vaccine.
Exactly.
Even though I kind of
Exactly.
argue that on the other side, but the mRNA technology and all that. But
It's
the more the greater likelihood is you got injured because of the bolus as opposed to just the mRNA technology in
exactly.
itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
that. I mean, if if I only had one thing to add, I would say, if I were you, I would try and add a chapter. Look, because we do this in a consulting or Lean Six Sigma. Then what you want me to do? All right, you told me, right? If I do the current state and it's screwed up, I've got to get a future state. So, and I don't know if that's obviously somebody else pulls together a team and figures out the best mechanism, whether it's a patch or whatever it is. But people might buy into it more if you said, okay, here's this probability of this causing that is zero or next to zero. Does that make sense with the
I
patch?
mean, it's not the most complicated part. The complicated part is convincing people. Doing what you're talking about takes 2 weeks work of time of a small team of 5, 10 people.
Gotcha.
That's not the problem is convincing people. I've taken the position. A lot of people have. Are unhappy with the position because they're saying, well, you're not, and you're not against, you don't want all the vaccines to be stopped.
Right.
And my philosophy here is very simple: is stopping all the vaccines forever is
Mm-hmm.
going to take 50 years or 30 years or whatever,
Right.
20 years. That means that during that period of time, people's lives are going to continue to be wasted.
Yep.
My approach is much simpler. It's basically saying, guys, you have a protocol, you're not complying with the protocol. Stop things now,
Fixed.
right? And then fix it. Fix it.
Yeah,
And I
and that was,
trust people to fix it. I mean there's it's not, I mean, Marc Girardot can say you need to do this. It's
mhm.
common sense. It's
Well,
I mean,
this is in
frankly,
short supply here. You don't. This is what we need a booster for is common sense.
it's really, this thing is common sense. Getting breaking the cognitive dissonance
Right.
is what's hard. It's
Yeah.
extremely hard to have people. I'm having conversation with my sister, whom I love dearly, who's a sweetheart, and we were having fights on COVID vaccines. I said, you don't touch this thing. There
Mhm.
people dying. I can tell you, I can show you, etc. And I was telling them I've worked. I'm not considered a stupid guy. I don't think anybody could, you know. And when I work hundreds of hours, and it's not thousands of hours on this, and I tell people, and people that I love,
Mhm.
don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm emotional about it. Is because there's a good reason. And she went on. She went and she harmed herself. She has arteriosclerosis.
Goodness
Um,
gracious.
and and um, and I'm trying. What's good is with the bolus theory is once you understand the mechanism of something,
Hmm.
you know, you you it's easier to find a cure, to find a fix, because you know when you have people saying infertility
Hmm.
and they come up with all sorts of weird reasons why women and men are infertile. it's ridiculous. But when I do a map, this afternoon I crafted a map and I put it in my last article of how women can become infertile with a bolus.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, here, 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 and here, and there are different, there are different solutions. But more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, when you know how things happen,
Right.
you can sort of um, you know, establish strategies for treatment, etc. Um, for example, HBOT is great, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm watchful that people don't take HBOT too aggressively at the first phase because we don't have too many stem cells in the heart for a good reason.
Right.
Most likely because if you repair too many heart cells, then you get asynchronous messaging in the heart, and you
Pulse.
get
Yep.
arrhythmia and heart attacks.
Right.
So you see, once you start understanding things holistically, you can come up with solutions. So you can say, well, if the heart, go easy. Maybe you start with just pure oxygen, slowly repair what needs to be repaired in the heart. If everything
Right.
is okay, you go to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, um, and um, it's gratifying, but I need things to move on, or start monetizing this, because I'm like it's a catastrophe. This room I'm actually renting on Airbnb, and my wife and daughter had to move out to Vancouver in Canada because I couldn't pay my rent here in Paris, and if I can't continue to pay my rent, I'm going to have to leave my apartment and be homeless. So I tell you, a guy like me that was used to making good money, pro bono is nice, but it's hard. You have to be committed.
To that end, this man is doing great work. If there's any way you can help him, can you give us your contact information? Do you have a GoFundMe page or anything like that so people can
I don't
help
have a
us?
GoFundMe page. You can go you can send me my email is marc.girardot Girardot at icloud.com.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm looking for sponsors. I'm looking for relays also,
Right.
who can understand the bolus theory, who can explain the bolus theory. I'm getting more and more of those. There are people helping me edit the book right now.
Right.
There are plenty of people. There's a wonderful lady who's doing extra hours of work and to send me a few hundred euros every month, which is a very touching. It's quite. I don't know what's the right term. I don't know if it's endearing or something like that. It's a quite crazy experience I've lived through. Um, Completely changed my
Just
network.
it's the experience. I know you'd mentioned being a Catholic. It's the experience of a prophet or a disciple, right? You're
Well, I
dependent
don't know
on
about the
others.
profit thing, but
Well,
it's your
I'm not comparing that in a biblical sense, right? But
I know.
experientially of what's
It's
happening.
no, but
Yeah.
you experience a lot of good
Yes.
a lot of goodness, a lot of meanness also.
That's
Incredibly mean people.
that's
Um,
the missionaries, right? And
it's
if you're a missionary, you get the same thing no matter where you go.
yeah, yeah.
People telling the truth are always going to be chastised by, I think, probably 60% of the people who didn't
There's a
give
lot
it
of
up.
people who are very, very aggressive. I managed keeping my friends. Most of my friends. I mean, some of my friends thought I was crazy. I was.
Well, you're not
But
even telling them not to take the vax. This is the part of the cognitive dissonance. You're not saying I'm anti-vax, vax away. You just need your methodology of application.
yeah,
You
I was
if you
telling them,
put your
watch out
tire on
how you get
backwards,
injected. Yeah, yeah, you're right. I was telling them, watch out how you were injected,
yeah,
and I've been telling that for some time. Yeah, we're in a crazy world, and I think people who are like you and me, were rooted in reality, um, are going to be very, very important in the years to come. because I think a lot of the world is lost some of that.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people who have lived in a world of completely virtual world with no feedback loop.
Right.
Like doctors, exactly what you're saying about doctors. Why, doctors. Well, now some of them died, of a vaccine, etc.
Yes.
But it's always what I was telling is like bodybuilders, they have skin in the game, and literally skin in the game.
And they're figuring
And
out a way to do it. The dumb bodybuilder that you think's an idiot is figuring out a better protocol for a shot than you
that's
are. You might
I
want
had
to
a
assess
I
what's up.
I wrote a piece on that, and I basically advised the WHO to take bodybuilders as advisors.
Yeah, yeah. The muscle heads you make fun of, you might want to listen.
Exactly. Go and
Boy,
listen to these
that's a
guys.
long bridge to get over, right?
Yeah, well, but as a consultant, I always went and I either interviewed people or went to the data, you
Hmm.
know,
In God
get
we trust.
feedback.
Everybody else bring data, right?
Yeah,
That's
Genji Getbutsu, huh?
yep.
Go and see for yourself on the ground. Or
Go to the Gemba. Yep, there you go. Mark, I can't thank you enough for joining me. And,
Rex, thank you so
and
much. It was great.
I mean, and it's look, someone needs to publish this book. I know Bongino and Bannon in this country both have publishing companies. Somebody out there needs to pick this up so we can stop harming so many children, just for starters, but adults and everyone. This is a travesty that something this simple could save so many lives. That's the thing that really, and you know this from a consulting perspective, is something so simple, but no one seems to do it. And it just, and I understand your passion because it pisses me off beyond note. I
it's,
yeah, it's, my wife's like, calm down. I just cannot take it.
it's
But
hard. You understand my mission. I mean, for me, I've been seeing this for 3 years. Okay,
yep.
so at first I was extremely emotional about it, especially I had a fight with my best friend for the first time in my entire life, where basically they're going to kill children.
Yep.
Here's my voice. It said they're going to kill children. He said, but you're crazy, Mark. You're going nuts.
That's what
I
everybody
said,
told
no,
me.
I can prove it.
You're going to murder them. You
and
already
and
murdered
and I
them.
was right. And I was
Yeah.
right. They have killed children. And I have failed. I
Yeah.
had failed those children.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, no, Mark, don't take this on you.
no, I
Yeah,
have I
yeah.
have
No,
not taken
it's
it.
hard not to take, right? And that's kind of those stages of grief. And trust me, it goes through me every day. I'm like, I've failed on this. I've failed my country. And part of this is because I've let my country get into a political dynamic that makes it impossible to tell the truth. Right. And as a third
Yeah,
gen vet, I take it even more personally.
yeah.
Uh,
It's a very weird period, but it's a period where um, you need a very very strong individuals, uh, very articulate, both intellectually and from a communication standpoint. Um, I think now the message is easier because during those 3 years,
mhm.
I was discovering things.
Right.
So every time somebody would ask me a question, I would have like 1,000 research papers come at me in my brain. I was like, give me a second. I was stuttering, etc. Now with the book writing has actually helped me to.
It's
Um,
therapeutic, right? That's why when my dad passed, I wrote a 13-page white paper to the Harvard of the South Teaching Hospital and said, "You got to be kidding me." And it was therapeutic as well. So,
yeah, it's having a framework is very useful. And now I don't know if you can show it. I have this framework. Um, Actually, or do you I don't know what it is. Are you online?
yeah,
If you go to, well, you can go to the last one. Today's. You could
on shoot, me trying to find something on the internet.
just click on COVID Mythbuster series on top.
Oh, okay, on the top. Okay,
Yeah, just click here.
okay, all right.
Okay, go to this one. What's driving the infertility boom? Which I just published today.
What's driving? Oh, duh. It's in the middle. No wonder I couldn't see it.
Okay,
Okay.
go down.
All right.
Down, 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 down. Ah, you need to be upgraded to pay. Sorry.
Oh, I got to pay. I need to lecture to myself. I need to pay.
No. Sorry. I thought I should have opened it up for you.
Well, you've got here, sadly today, 12.6% of the world population is infertile, and I think you touched on that. Oh, you still with me?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Just give me a second. Let me try and
Okay.
Let me come. Can you see what I?
Yes, I can see you. Yeah.
Okay.
And we can, I mean, if we can't see it, we can always go, well, it looks like it's full screen. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
So you see, this is the bolus theory framework. And make it maybe a bit smaller.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So you see there are two different types of cells: normal immune sensitive cells and stem cells here.
Right. Yep. That's it. Yep.
And here you have cardiovascular system damage.
Yep.
Right. Thrombosis, aneurysm, arteriosclerosis, white clot syndrome, fistula and angiomas. Then you have necrosis and microperforation. You see here, I have examples of how the vaccines are harming fertility,
right,
in different ways. Okay, through necrosing the ovaries and the uterus, or necrosing the endothelial glands, or by creating microperforation that cause endometriosis, for example. So it's actually it's I can fit in right now, and maybe I'll discover other factors, but right now I can fit in all the illnesses that I have.
Can hyperbolic chamber oxygenation help with that?
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy works perfectly for 7.
Okay.
It works some for 8, for 6.
Okay.
It helps for cancer because it does 2 things. It can repair, and it increases the immune cells that are fighting cancer.
Okay.
I'm not so sure about genetic disorders, but in the case of this lady who was talking about her daughter who has Down syndrome,
right?
She was saying it was working. It worked very, very well. Her daughter improved considerably. I mean, you could go on the internet. If you type hyperbaric oxygen therapy and Down syndrome, you will fall on that lady's case, and she's very positive about it. So it's very surprising. So it's possible. It's possible that both for cancer and for genetic disorder, if you use up the damaged stem cells, they get replaced by non-damaged ones.
Gotcha.
And so that would fix the problem, at least some of the problem.
Gotcha.
Voila. Where am I?
Voila. There we go. Well, all right, Marc.
Thank you so much.
We're at the 2.5 hour mark. I wonder if anybody will actually watch it.
Yeah,
but
I know.
If they want to learn, and that's the problem with this world. Everybody's fast food. They can't sit down and watch anything. You got your picture back for me?
I'm sorry.
I just can't see your picture.
Are you? Oh, that's really weird. Oh, that's strange.
Is that technology?
Because I'm sorry. When I shared screen, it erases the video. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it blocks it. Look, Marc, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing. It's been enlightening to me. I've been reading your stuff, since you've been putting it out. And I know if people will actually watch and take the time, they can learn something. And sadly, this is the sad part, is we have to build a political movement to make any change, because doctors aren't going to change on their own, especially if it means they're going to admit any wrongdoing. And we don't even want you to admit wrongdoing out there, doctors. We just want you to fix what's going forward, please. Right? That's our plea. Look, the past is the past. We can't get that. You can leave the lawyers for that. What we're here for is try and stop the madness in the future. And this man has done your work, actually, work you should have done eons ago. And actually, it's kind of coincidental for the flu, right? In 1918, you took people outside to give them vitamin D, and during COVID, you locked them inside. This is despicable. But anyway, I got on my horse, Mark. Sorry.
It's okay. We all do. I mean, we can get emotional. There's good reason to get emotional. You know, I wrote a piece the other day on fallibility. I was always one of the things I was very uncomfortable with mandates, any sort of mandates.
Yep.
Is when you're a consultant like I am, you know how organizations are dysfunctional.
Yes.
Right. All organizations.
All, every one of them.
All organizations, all human
Yep.
organizations are dysfunctional. They cut corners. They do trade-offs. They
Yep.
do consensus, and therefore mistakes are made. And so, if mistakes are made, and you're playing with the lives of children, other people's children, you don't mandate. You can't
Exactly.
have a right. You
Yep.
cannot have a right to mandate if you're fallible.
Well, this is a
and
fundamental.
we're all fallible. It's not a question of
Yeah.
personal competency or what. It's just organizations are immensely fallible.
Yep.
Corruption, intellectual corruption, financial corruption, but also moral corruption happens very, very quickly. You know that from the Stanford prison experiment. It takes 24 hours for people to become sadistics.
Yep.
The sadists. So when from that moment on, you need to be, all about freedom. You need to be all about freedom if you're trying to constrain people, or else you're getting ready to go to,
Tyranny. Yeah. Yep.
to be accountable
Yep.
for what you did. And for some people, I would expect some people to not only go to jail, but be court-martialed for crime against humanity, because some people have clearly taken had double, tripled, quadrupled downs on these vaccines when people knew they were harming.
Yep.
And on top,
Yep.
added the kids,
Yep.
which is unpardonable. Is that the term?
You just coined it. Well, Mark, once again, I appreciate it. Godspeed. If you can help this man, help him.
I would appreciate it. Yeah,
if you know somebody publishes a book, get them. I'm going to contact a couple. I don't know anybody. I'm not rich, but we'll at least reach out. Thanks again, Mark. You have a good one, brother.
Thanks.
And Godspeed. Godspeed. You're doing the Lord's work, all right? Seriously, you are. You are. Don't make me get emotional. All right, Mark. We'll see you, bud. Good luck.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thanks.